Aw, isn't that cute? This game has some adorable car designs, I gotta admit. It's nice and oh. Oh no, don't do this, Stunt Race FX. Don't remind me of a much better game that I'd much rather be playing than you right now. That's the worst thing you could do. This is Stunt Race FX, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the second game ever to make use of the Super FX chip. You know, the thing that powered Star Fox on the same console. Stunt Race FX is a bit more involved, however, because it is a racing game that has you driving these weird car things around a few tracks, and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's also stunt tracks and things of that nature. Now, I'm going to get this out of the way. I didn't enjoy Stunt Race FX. There's a couple things in there that keep this from being one of those games that I'll revisit in the future, but on the other hand, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a bad game. Just one of those cases where it didn't quite click with me, but it may work for you because there's something of a decent game to be found here buried among some of the more questionable technical bits. Although given the choice, I'd much rather be playing Stunt Race FX than Cyber Speedway on Sega Saturn, but that's another story that we've already touched on previously. So Stunt Race FX gives you 4 modes of play: speed tracks, stunt tracks, battle tracks, and free tracks. Speed tracks is your default racing component. You have 4 sets of 4 tracks to play through. Basically, race 3 laps around each track and try to finish first. After the second race, you can choose to play a bonus track where you can drive around a semi-truck in an attempt to earn an extra life or extra time on the clock. Or you just skip ahead to the next track if you want to skip all that. If you manage to complete both the normal and expert classes, you'll unlock Master Class and its 4 tracks, none of which you'll see here, I'm afraid. There's Stunt Tracks, which is your stunt racing component. Here your goal is to collect as many stars as possible while completing 1 lap around the track before time runs out. You've got 4 different tracks to play around here, have fun if you can. If you manage to collect all the stars and do well with the 4 tracks, you'll unlock a 5th and final track. Battle Tracks is the 2-player racing mode via split screen. And finally you have Test Run, which later becomes free tracks, which lets you do time trials around any of the classes you've unlocked. You've got 4 different car things to choose from, each with different stats and stuff. In bonus stages, you can control a semi-truck, which isn't the most intuitive thing, but is a more functional vehicle than anything out of big rigs. There's a couple other things you could unlock here and there, but other than that, there's a fair bit of variety with as little actual content as possible. Whatever that actually means. And I mean, look, in terms of the actual racing, it's somewhat passable, but not ideal. A huge part of the blame falls on the controls, which feel overly sensitive. There were times where it felt like no matter how gentle I tried to be, the car would oversteer and run into a wall as a result. So there's a learning curve in adapting to the touchy controls and trying to get a good groove going to where you can race these things efficiently and cleanly enough. Chances are you'll have much better luck than I did, but even still, it's not completely, it's salvageable, I guess I should say. Also not helpful is the handling of these cars are rather poor in general, which proves to be something of a detriment in the stunt tracks where you have to drive all over the place to collect all the stars and deal with hills, peaks, valleys, and other things that will cause your car thing to careen out of control if you're not careful. Even with the L and R bumpers that are supposed to help with turns, it's not that helpful, and control ends up being more of a problem than it's worth, though like I said, it's only part of the overall problem with Stunt Race FX. Stunt Race FX uses the Super FX chip to give us polygonal 3D environments and settings that you drive around in, and the camera follows along and rotates, things of that nature. It might not seem like it, but this was a more ambitious implementation of the chip than Star Fox, where you mostly flew along a straight line. And listen, never mind the choppy frame rate or the simple polygons or stuff like that. For Super Nintendo to pull off this sort of thing that you'd mostly only see at PCs and higher-end gaming consoles at the time was pretty damn sweet. Gameplay aside, this was probably the most impressive showing of Super FX until Doom graced the console a year or so later. That said, it's a simple presentation, minimal textures, mostly solid colors and such, but they've crafted some decent looking streets and scenery that's pleasing enough to the eyes, at least in 1995. The little car designs are rather cute and charming, giving this game a bit of personality. As you'd expect, the issue of course boils down to frame rate, which is unsurprisingly inconsistent and fairly low. giving Stunt Race FX a pretty choppy appearance at worst, and even when you're racing at high speeds, you still get a bit of a stutter in the smoothness. Still, I wouldn't call this entirely unbearable as some would suggest. You people want unbearable, find yourself a copy of Race Driving on Super Nintendo, play that for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then get back to me. Go ahead, I'll wait. Excuse me. Blood thinners, in case anyone was wondering. Forgot to take these hours ago, so I was supposed to take them like twice a day to keep the blood going and stuff. Alright, I've waited long enough. We're moving on. As you could probably tell, Stunt Race FX was made by Nintendo, so of course you have a collection of tunes that are cheerfully playful, delightfully happy, and recognizably Nintendo. I'll let you decide what that actually means, but suffice it to say that if you've heard one Nintendo first-party game on Super Nintendo, you've heard them all, and this is no exception. That's the best I could come up with. Regardless, it fits the charming world that Stunt Race employs, and aside from the usual bumps and crashing sounds that are consistent for these racing games, you also have some funny honking sounds from the cars whenever they jump or whatever that is they do, crash into things, I don't know. They're funny sounding, I chuckled. Worth a mention or two, I guess. Okay, so this is a case where your mileage is going to vary here, because I know there's a few folks that think Stunt Race FX is A-okay. And to be fair, while the game does feel a bit clunky at times and the controls are perhaps a bit overly sensitive for my tastes, among other things here and there, Stunt Race FX is still a more than playable little racing game on Super Nintendo, and if nothing else was a fairly decent showcase of Super FX for its day. It's not a great game by any means, and there are far better racers on SNES in general, but Stunt Race FX has its moments if you could put up with some of its quirks. I'd call this one just fine, and move on to something else.